Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Wells, and I'm here with my great friend Kevin Fisher,
Hey, everybody.
and we're here together in the same environment. On the rare occasion that can happen, we're in what I call my playroom or studio out here, which is a great environment for Kevin and I to bounce ideas off of each other and just to converse on various topics that are near and dear to us. And one of those topics is the topic of self love, which both of us consider very fundamental to every human being, but in particular, people who are on a spiritual path. It's essential to address this issue. I think for all of us as human beings, just the nature of being human is going to throw obstacles in the way of what is a natural state of loving ourselves. And we have to work through those obstacles and try and move them out of the way of love so that it can come forth. Um, but it's also an essential part, as Kevin, I think, would attest, to loving others.
hmm
How would you put that,
Yeah,
Kevin?
you can't truly love other people and other things until you love yourself unequivocally. And unfortunately, society over the past decades and maybe even hundreds of years have told us that you need to put everybody else first. And loving yourself would be a narcissistic way of living your life. I think it's important to understand that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about getting in touch with your core essence, which is love, and allowing that love to shine. And the energy that comes from that is something that bathes everybody in that same type of love. And so uh, that's not to say that you can't love somebody else or do nice things for other people. Um, from a love standpoint, you can do that, but you're not doing it to the fullest extent unless you start by loving yourself.
That's, I think that's a fundamental tenet of spiritual growth. I've heard it said many times by others and subscribe entirely that you can't love others any more than you love yourself. So there's a threshold that's created by the amount that you can love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, or if you hate yourself, um, and are unable to come in touch with that part of you that loves yourself, you can do all kinds of things for other people, but you aren't really loving them because you don't have that capacity. That
Mm.
capacity is created by self love, and you can then share that with others and love them.
Ah, yep. And I think the ego likes to try to keep you in some ways from loving yourself uh, by feeding that self-loathing into the process and keeping you from doing that. So how do we love ourselves, Steve? How do we go about the process of doing that? It's easy to say, well, you just need to love yourself, but
It's not so easily done.
it's not.
And I think there are a few of us that have looked at this subject of and seen the need to love ourselves and then not scratched our heads and said, okay, well, I understand I need and want to love myself, but how do I do that? You
Yeah.
know, how do you take steps? It's not like turning a light switch on or something. It's not so straightforward. So,
Yeah, I
well,
wish. That would be great. Louise Hay had a great little practice that whereby she instructed you to stand in front of a mirror every single day and look into your own eyes and say, "I love you." And the first few hundred times you do this, it's going to be awkward and feel fake and not so great. But over time, after you do this a number of times, it starts resonating, and it's a good practice. But there are other things we can do as well. One of them, I think, is to put yourself first on the priority list. And again, that sounds like it might be a selfish thing, and in some ways it is. Selfish is treating yourself first. And again, the way sometimes you have to do it is you have to tell people no. If you're a pleaser, if you're a yes person, and you're always doing things for other people and not for yourself, that's a tough way to live. And oftentimes I would suggest that that's really not a good way to love yourself, because you're putting everybody else's needs first. What might be another thing to do?
Well, another thing that you can do is just take care of yourself, pamper yourself. I think women in particular have a tendency to put others first, and that's honorable. And certainly in years past, that was, from a religious perspective, that was a very important tenet to being a good person.
It was
is
noble.
To put yourself second, put yourself last, and serve other people first. And it was noble at that time. But consciousness has evolved to the point to where it's now understood that it's fine to serve others, but you can't really serve them in the highest way without serving your own needs first, and then serving others.
Yeah.
So I think pampering yourself is an important thing. Does that mean you just treat yourself constantly and go out and charge up the credit card bill and buy yourself a bunch of nice things? Well, there's a somewhat different perspective on it, where you do treat yourself and show yourself that you are important. Treat yourself as if you are important, and live your life like that too. And that is a form of self-love.
Yeah. I think that you and I still struggle sometimes with self-love. I feel that I've put a great amount of effort into loving myself, and I can honestly say that I do love myself, but it takes work, and I sometimes focus on my flaws that takes away from that self-love sometimes. But I find ways to get my focus back to loving myself and trying to take the ego out of it, out of the equation as much as possible. Because, when you pamper yourself, if it doesn't work so well for self-love, if you feel guilty about spending, $80 for a massage that you deserve to have that. But if you feel guilty about it, you're not self-loving. That's your self-doubt. That's your self-loathing. That's your ego talking.
Yeah, and I think that these various things that you do, there are a variety of tools, and Kevin's mentioned some, just by virtue of doing them. So, for instance, looking in the mirror and saying, "I love you." Well, part of the process is over a period of time. Let's say you do that over a period of weeks. The fact that you have given yourself the time to try and love yourself more, you're going to feel like, well, I have really taken steps to love myself more, and I love myself because I've done that. So that's kind of at the core of it. I have taken measures to treat myself well and increase my own sense of self-worth. And by virtue of having taken the steps, even though the steps themselves may have done nothing, by virtue of having put myself first and taking those steps, I now love myself more.
Wow, that's great. And can I bring up the tool belt?
Sure, you bet.
Are you sure? I always bring up the tool belt. So my feeling is that the self-love aspect of what we're doing is like the chainsaw on our tool belt. And it's going to do the most amount of work if we use our chainsaw early on. We can mess around with our screwdrivers and hammers and whatnot, but the big work is going to get done when we pull out that chainsaw and deal with self-love.
Very much agreed. That self-love is really at the very foundation. So Kevin says chainsaw, and that's because it's a heavy hitter. And unless you do that large-scale work on the foundation that needs to be done, the other peripheral tools aren't going to do much good for you.
And don't you also agree, Steve, that self-love weaves its way into so many other aspects of the spiritual path that we're on? Not only a foundation, but it's not in and of itself. It feeds into a whole lot of other aspects. And so you're going to hear us talk about self-love a lot, just like we'll talk about ego a lot, probably.
Right. These are really fundamental aspects of spiritual growth and evolution. And so the other topics that we bring up, you'll find this popping up again and again.
Yeah.
Because in order to evolve spiritually, you really have to evolve in your self-love.
Yeah. It's a building block. Yes?
It is. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, great. Steve, what a good little dialogue on this subject. And there's going to be more to come, I'm sure.
There's going to be more to come, but we'd like to hear that more, or a lot of that more, from you guys. We'd like to have others give their experiences in trying to evolve in their own self-love. It may be some tools that you have that help you, because granted, it's not an easy process. It's hard to get your arms around and really understand what it is, much less take measures to improve it.
Yeah.
So we understand the challenges,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that many of you do too. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on any aspect of it.
Yeah.
Would be great.
We can always use the help, right, Steve?
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us today, guys, and it'll be fun to continue this conversation.
It will be. We look forward to talking with you and hearing from you in the future.
All
Well,
right.
take care.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Did you get it?